It's Christmas time, a time for love, hopefully peace, and a time for the philosophy of economics, although there are fewer cards with that theme. And a time to ask, why do we give people presents? If we assume that the purpose of giving a gift is to make the recipient happy with the gift, and if we assume that people generally know themselves what will make them happy better than other people can guess, then it doesn't really make sense to buy anyone a present. You should just give them the money, because they will use it to buy something that will make them happier than anything you could have bought them. In his book Scroogenomics, the economist Joel Waldfogel says that gift giving destroys value. If I spend $10 on a present for you, and you would have been willing to spend $10 buying that present for yourself, then I have given you $10 worth of happiness. But if I give you a present and you would only have been willing to spend $5 on it, then I've spent $10, but I've only given you $5 worth of happiness. That gap is what Waldfogel calls the deadweight loss of Christmas. He tries to measure that gap. He asked people to estimate how much they would be willing to spend on the gifts they had received at Christmas, and then compared those estimates to how much the gifts actually cost. And he found that among the people he asked, they generally valued the gifts at lower than their true price. And using those figures, he estimated that every American Christmas there is a deadweight loss of $13 billion. Now, it's important you understand that number. It's not government waste, it's not gone up in smoke or anything. That's just the gap that he says exists between how much Americans spend to make others happy and how happy those others actually become. It's not just Christmas presents this would apply to either. Birthdays, anniversaries, buying somebody a holiday, buying someone an engagement ring or dinner. Market logic would say that all of those are inefficient and you should just give people cash. But let's go back to one of the assumptions that we made earlier. We assumed that giving gifts is about making the other person happy with the gift. But what if that's not true? Let's say I get you a present for Christmas, and it's something really thoughtful and really tailored to your interests, even though it's not something you would have chosen for yourself had I just given you the money. Well, doesn't that say something about our relationship? Doesn't it say that I value you, and I listen to you, and I care about your happiness, and maybe even that I love you? And let's say it's something that you would never have chosen for yourself in a million years, like a cookery course, or a skydiving class, or a painting lesson. And if you really enjoy that, well then you've just learned something about yourself, and I helped you discover that, and that's really, really cool. So maybe it's not about the value of the gift, maybe it's about the relationship between the people. The value of a relationship is difficult to create a market in. Imagine somebody that you really, really love, okay? You got them? How much money would I have to give you for you to never speak to them again? Now, there's probably a few people in your life where you're like, well, yeah, if you give me $1 million, I'd happily never speak to Dave again. He's a tool. But no, come on, somebody that you really, really love. I think about my best friends or my brothers, and you couldn't pay me not to ever see them again. Not because there's not enough money in the world, but because the value of those relationships isn't something that can be measured in money. It's just not that sort of thing. It's like trying to measure the distance to the moon in degrees Celsius. It's what philosophers call a category error. And once I realized that there are some things money can't buy, I started to wonder if there are some things that maybe money shouldn't buy. Like, for instance, children. There are a lot of children who need to be adopted, and there are a lot of families who would like to have children but can't. An economist might suggest, as Simon Posner once did, that we should create a market in adopting children. Let people bid on children, and the highest bidders get the kid. Bidforakid.com. Get the app now. But like with a relationship, we might say, don't have to, but we might, that the value of a child isn't something that can be just measured or best measured in money. That it's not that kind of thing, that it would corrupt it, not in the sense of bribery corruption, but in the sense that we misvalue it. Standard economics maintains that creating a market in something does not change the thing itself, but encouraging people to view something as a commodity that can be bought and sold does change the way they look at it. In his book, What Money Can't Buy, the philosopher Michael Sandel cites an example of a school where parents kept turning up late to pick up their kids, so the staff couldn't go home because they had to stay and watch them. And the staff got so sick of it that they started fining parents who turned up late. Now, we might expect that parents would start turning up on time because they suddenly have a financial incentive to be there. But they didn't. More and more parents started turning up late because they were no longer viewing lateness as an imposition that they shouldn't inflict on someone else. They were viewing it as a service for which they could pay, as a commodity that they could consume. To take another topical example, consider something like immigration. A lot of public discourse about immigration boils down to market logic. Are they good for us or bad for us? Are they good for our employers, our economy? But doesn't that value immigration in terms of what it does for us, rather than in terms of what it does for immigrants? I invite you to the question, and feel free to reject it, either wholly or in part, but I invite you to ask, what if the value of stuff like immigration isn't measured or best measured in what it does for us, but in terms of the happiness that it allows somebody else to achieve in their life? 2016 has not been a year in which many people have asked that question. When we create a market in something, we don't just change the role it plays, we change the role we play. We cast ourselves in the role of consumers. I don't like the idea of taking money not to see my loved ones, because that presents our relationship as a resource that I am consuming and would be willing to exchange for something of similar value. But I think that's a category error. Maybe when we talk about immigration, we too often cast ourselves in the role of consumers of a resource made up of human beings. I invite you to the idea that consumer is not an identity that we have to have all the time. There's a famous bit in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, where the character of Portia tries to persuade the villain of the play, Shylock, to have mercy. And she says, "The quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed, it blesseth him that gives and him that takes." In other words, some things have a value that can't be measured in money. Things like love, generosity, mercy. They're not like oil, a resource where the more you consume, the less you have. They're like a muscle. The more you use them, the stronger they become. You might think that that sounds very sappy and Christmassy and naive, but category errors are very, very real. And if philosophers like Sandel are right, then maybe market logic increases the likelihood of them. So this Christmas, if you are giving or receiving gifts, I invite you to consider what it is that you value and whether it really is the gift that's valuable to you. And if you are celebrating it, allow me to wish you a very Merry Christmas. Can you see that? I can see my breath. That is how cold it is in my flat. I can't afford to turn the heating on. Patreon.com/philosophytube allows me to pay the rent and afford food. Even $1 a month would massively, massively make my Christmas and my New Year. So anything you can do to help would be very much appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe.